Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Voices for Voices TV show and podcast. I'm your host, founder of Voices for Voices, Justin Allen Hayes. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode, as well as all the other over 280 episodes plus that we have both in studio and out of studio. We have, for those that don't know, we every Wednesday a new in studio episode comes out. The interesting part with that being that it's a TV studio, we have to film those ahead, and sometimes we miss, may miss current events or guests that we want to talk to in the meantime, and we don't want to wait, especially since we just filmed the last week, so we'd be waiting another 3 weeks to film, and then it would be the following month of uh, of August, and then the first week, actually probably the first 2 weeks of September. And so that's why you may have seen and heard quite a few out of studio episodes this season four than what you have prior, because we love sharing information. We love sharing people, their stories, the things that they do, ways that we can connect with them. And that's what Voices for Voices is for. It's a platform to be able to do that. And so we want to maximize that anytime we can. And that remains the same way with our last episode with guest author Ben Sanford, who is also our guest in this second part. Author Ben Sanford, we're having such a good conversation, and the way Zoom operates, it kind of finds its own time when they think that the show should end, and the show ends. So we weren't able to properly uh, talk and share about Ben's series and his books. So you, the readers, the viewers, the listeners, whether it's you or somebody you know, or maybe it's a birthday or a holiday upcoming that you may have an interest in the books he writes, or you may just like a good book to read on the beach, on vacation, or on your commute to and from work. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us on this the second part.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Yeah, if you'll be able just to pick up or even start over is quite okay with the characters and a little bit about the worlds that happen to disseminate those.
Okay, I guess I'll start off with Arax because that's my main story because it's that series is actually complete. I just finished book seven. Um, both of my series are fantasy epics, so they're on a large, grander scale. Arax is set in a different world than Earth, and it's set in 500 years in our future, and there's a lot of back history to it. So it's a medieval world where people are still fighting with bows and arrows and swords, kind of like the Roman Empire. The main antagonists are gargoyles, and if you I have it in the back cover. The back cover sort of sets a synopsis for the story. I'll start off with that, and then
Mm.
I'll talk about where the meat of the story, where the characters are that matter. um so basically at the beginning of the prehistory of Arax, gargoyles were actually servants of their god Yah, and they betrayed him, and in their rebellion he cast them down to Arax, but he put them in mortal form in the hideous creatures that they are, which are gargoyles. They used to be beautiful angelic creatures, but now they are deformed creatures who breed in great numbers, but they don't have any magical powers. And they despise mankind and want to destroy mankind. So the creator, Yah, rose up a human champion to defeat them named Cal. And he was pure of heart, and he got his vision of what this ancient god wants him to do for their world. And he unites mankind to defeat the gargoyles. But his lords betrayed him. They didn't want to follow along with what he wanted, and basically they disobeyed God themselves, their God. And right, but when they look like they could find destroy the gargoyles for all time, they betrayed him, and then his kingdom fell to ruin, and they raised up their own kingdoms. But since they did not defeat the Gargoyles, their own kingdoms fell in kind over the centuries, one by one. And then, therefore, mankind was in this balance against the Gargoyles. They could never, no one can either really destroy the other. And this went on for almost 2,500 years until the main antagonist in the story, named Tyro, a human, who led a revolt against another group of humans, aligned with the Gargoyles, and which tipped the total balance of all of Arax. Now, at the start of the story, he now controls all of northern Arax, and he's threatened to sweep south. In the backdrop of this, a young Tory, a Tory is the middle kingdom of this world. Still, they're a good human kingdom. You know, you define how good they are by, you know, you look at their history. They're the only ones that are still held true to what King Kale wanted to do long ago. And so there's a Tory farmer who's got his only son named Tarin, and his son's going to go to journey off to be a scribe and assistant to an ambassador who's an old friend of his father's in this area that's somewhere in between Tyro's empire and Tory North. And his father gives him a sword, a magical sword with mysterious powers to it. The rest of it's a mystery. You'll find out as you read the story where it comes from. And he's like, "What do I need the sword to go on this journey?" Well, that'll be explained as you begin the story. So the story begins with Tarin is just going to become a humble scribe to a king's minister. And then he eventually he meets all the other characters that become important in the story. And he takes on a central role, that's unforeseen role, that he doesn't realize he was actually destined for this. There was nothing mistake about it. Where he was groomed for his role, and that's going to come the war that's going to break out between the Gargoyles and the humans in the north and his own kingdom. And eventually the story will encompass all the other realms of Arax. There's another group of creatures called Janai. They're winged creatures. They're like winged humans. They're more exotic than regular humans. And they're the opposite number of the Gargoyles. They're kind of like servants of Yah that were put down on Arax and also in mortal form, but they were more beautiful and more graceful. And they're supposed to help the humans, help guide them to fight the Gargoyles. There's reptilian warriors. There's ape warriors that speak. All these different creatures. So what happened, the whole story ends up being trying to unite all these different peoples against this great darkness that's going to encroach upon them. And that follows the entire course of the book. There's a lot of repentant, a lot of stories of repentance throughout it. And the people's hearts change as you see that other people, you know, hearts stay hardened. They don't want to do it. It's really about the brotherhood of the characters, with the sisterhood of the characters to unite, come together, and you see their journey. There's also side characters from Earth who are stranded on this world, and they have modern technology, and they talk and act like we do. Where these people on this planet.
Wow. Looks like we had a little bit of a. Here we go. There we are. We love technology. There we go. Mark is Ben is on his way back. There we are.
There we go.
Yeah. Here we
Nice.
go.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Go
I don't know
ahead.
if it was my
Continue.
problem or what. Yeah.
No, it's all good. Well, it happened to me last week. So
All right.
I'm getting used to like just about anything. Yeah, you can pick up
Okay. So talk about the Earthers. So there's people from Earth that are stuck on this planet, and from their crashed starship, they created a seagoing vessel. But they have some of the technology they have from Earth, but most of the stuff they're just stuck on this planet. And they have no way of communicating back to Earth, so they're trapped with no hopes of ever getting home. And I use those characters are mainly they're the comic relief. They're usually everybody's favorite character because they also speak and talk like us. And they always, if you ever think of in a story you're watching and you're like, well, why don't they just do that? That's exactly what the Earthers always do. They always do exactly what you would do in those situations. So that's why people usually connect better with them than even the main characters sometimes. Um, but it literally sets them apart in the story. And their ship is called the Stenix, which is the name of my I use for the publishing company. But yeah, so the Earthers are more of the comic relief. They're also, um, I guess if you're trying to describe it, if you ever watch like a, I don't know if you ever see it, whether it's a TV show or a movie. Mainly, if this happens in TV shows, you have a secondary character that really steals the limelight, and the writers always make a mistake of turning that person. Well, let's make them the main part of the show, and it ruins everything, right? Like Han Solo in Star Wars is best as the secondary character. Luke has to be the main character that allows Han to just be Joe Cool. Um, if you ever remember the show Happy Days growing up,
Hmm.
Fonzie took over the show. He was great in the first two seasons when he was just a minor character, and he's awesome when he shows up. But when they just made the whole thing about it, and ruined it. So as a writer, you got to be careful if you have a characters who are like this. They threaten to take over, then you have to keep them. Don't let them take over the whole story. So the Earthers in the story are, when you're reading the books, they're like, okay, these are the guys you'll identify with because they're from our world, even though it's set in the future. Um, and trying to explain it beyond that, it's like, so basically you're just following this entire war as it happens. So every single book, I have all the armies in the back of the book, and they change because of the different losses in the disposition, and sometimes the alliances shift. But you're following the story. You can go use that as a guideline so you can keep it all the, because there's so many. Eventually, there's so many names, and you can get lost um, if you don't try to keep on track of it. But I try to keep the pacing slow enough at the beginning so you can get invested in the main characters and then grow from there slowly. My second series is called Freeborn. And while the first series has a lot of Christian underpinnings to it, Freeborn is not, but it's not opposed to it either. Freeborn is more of a metaphor on power and magic, and how I always funny watching people write books or even show movies where there's a magic system and people who have magic are being oppressed. Making, well, that would be like a power source, unlike anything else. And of course, people would abuse it if they had it. If you look unchecked power, then people always abuse it. So if you had a medieval setting where it was passed on genetically, then people would gather that powers unto themselves, and the peasants would never have any chance of having a revolution because magic would be the nobles would have magic and power. So in my Freeborn book, I had the main character is immune to magic. He can regenerate and he's strong, but he's immune to magic, which means he's a threat to their entire social order. And his father's a king of one of the realms, but he doesn't want to become king. He wants no one to kneel to him, and he doesn't want to kneel to anyone else. He wants to be free and just choose his own world, his own way, which just seems totally alien to all of their belief systems. At the beginning of the book, he follows through a portal that his grandfather has uncovered, and only he can access it because he has anti magic. That's why he's immune to magic. And he goes to the Old West for like 5 or 6 chapters. And I don't sugarcoat the Old West. That's a dangerous place. But it's in the story. It grounds him, and he finally sees a world where there are no kings and nobles in charge. Right? It's just grit and determination and your own self against the world. But it's basically people are free, and it's a completely alien concept that always seems like home to him. And then he eventually has to go back to his home world, and the whole story is about him taking on the social mores of the world he's surrounded by. Because the world is, it's not, even though magic can be used in this world for good things, it's also used as abuse. And so you see him, he's supposed to be destined to free the world. And he's like, well, why, how am I supposed to do that? He doesn't want it. He just wants to set his own course. So that Freeborn, that's the basic grounding when you see at the beginning of the story. And it's completely different from Arax in that way. It's more of Ethan's journey and the people he interacts with, where Arax is you're following a whole cast of characters fighting this mythical war against, these satanic beings. I
Great.
don't know if you have any questions from there, but that's the 2 books in a nutshell.
No, I don't. I like the way that you're able to separate them just as they are. I I think I think both, I don't say genres, but both of those anthologies, I think are very well thought out when you just mentioned the pacing of how this is like one thing is just like a layman. Uh, yeah, you hear the word or pacing. It's like okay, it's how fast or slow or moderate, and so just to hear you talk about at the beginning that you slow it down because there is that information, those characters that you want to take a little extra time for the reader to take a little bit extra time. But then when things start moving, that pace does pick up. So uh, the whole book isn't at that same pacing as the beginning. And I think I never thought about things like there's all kind of things I don't think about, but it's just interesting to hear that, and it makes a whole lot of sense from a just a strategy perspective of okay, if I was reading a book and this was going on and there's this cast of characters, would I want to have it constant speed throughout or pacing, or would I change it? And I think for viewers and listeners, I think that's something that's a good takeaway for aspiring authors, authors, if you're already an author or know somebody, that we don't have to be in a box. That you know you, you have control over that, and I think that's just a perfect example of you have control over the pacing as you're the author, and you make a decision like slowing down and then making things faster, and then maybe there's times in other books where maybe the ending might maybe that slows down or it could, and not to think that well I have to do it consistently all throughout, or I'll say or else, but people might not be interested, or they uh I don't know, because I've read a lot of uh, James Patterson, and they're just like real fast, and you just hey turn, 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 and it's similar throughout. Whereas I was like, okay, I I actually would prefer if there was more kind of more meat at the beginning of some book, and it would book would take a little bit of a slower approach instead of that consistency all through, because I think, as we all know, our minds and our brains all kind of grow and at their own speeds, and to have a little bit of a change up isn't a bad thing.
I guess I've always struggled. The parts I had to change a little bit is because I was very at the very beginning. This is about the war, so the battles were intricate and detailed. And as you mature in your writing, you're like, okay, then some of the battle, okay, I need to make it this get to the point of it and not go into like I would lose like it's like the men that read the book loved the battles and they would read every line.
Mhm.
The women readers would be like, okay, they glaze over some of the battles, right? Then there's other parts that are like, the dialogue, which people love that and everything else, but it's the battles themselves trying to shape it. Particularly, I guess when I got to the Siege of Corel and in book two, which is the pinnacle part of the book, I have the longest chapter I ever wrote is basically the siege from day one until the day before the final assault.
So,
And I have little things happening, battle scenes, then I have interpersonal, I have little um where the characters are speaking and
mhm.
different emotional things happening along the way to break it up because you can't just go constantly through. You have to break up the action scenes, and otherwise you lose people. It's like it's just too much. You got to like let the people collect their mind. Okay, this is what happened on this day of this day 24 of the siege, and there's a small action here, and then this happened here. Then these few characters talked here. It's enough where you got interspersed when you have lots of action going on. You got to give those little human moments that allows to ground the reader back and let them collect themselves and catch their breath and have a heartfelt moment going on between two different characters. So I guess learning to do that and make it so the battles are interesting by adding the human character with it and breaking it up is the one thing. It's like when I first started writing, I wasn't doing that. That's like you have to do that, otherwise you lose the writer or you lose the reader. Yeah, but the battles in the first book are not too bad. They're not that long. It's book two. I have a couple of long ones, and book three is a lot of long battle. But I finally get to the end, and it's a little bit more. The pacing's a little bit better. So you're talking about pacing. That's the other thing. It's like
Hmm.
you can't lose your reader by boring them with detail.
What would you, whether it's advice, or we've talked, there's so many different areas of the writing process, and uh, what would you tell an aspiring author or somebody that's thought about uh, because that's aspiring, somebody who has maybe hit a rut and they've had it in their mind, this is what I want to do, and I have these ideas, and then maybe they're only halfway through, and halfway through, and they're just like, you know what, like I'm just I'm gonna go move on to something else because, and while that might be for some people, it might just be like an interest thing. Like it might be interesting for a period of time, and then may move on. But
Well,
what would you kind of guide just
that
as
was it 80. Of course, the statistics are always going to be wrong, but they said that was it 80% of the population has thought about writing a book, but only like maybe 3% put any effort into it, and of those do it. No, most of them don't complete, and those that complete never get it published. But I say this: with Arax for me was a story that got in my head, and I'm not a writer. The story got in my head, and I wouldn't let me go. So I wanted to keep. I kept rewriting it and putting a little effort into it my entire life, and I just wouldn't stop. And I finally, in my mid-30s, I just started like, I just need to start from scratch and rewrite. I already had the outline because I wrote the first book in high school. I just rewrote it. Um, and it's still not great. The first two books of Rex are not great writing. They're still by my standard now, they're not great writing. But I didn't give up. And the whole thing is I would suggest you do is if you are already halfway through anything for your manuscript, whatever it is, don't go back and try to fix the beginning of it. At least for the first book, finish that first story, right? And then outline what you want to do for your sequels. If it's a series, if it's a standalone, then it's even easier. And then go back and write from the beginning, and just you have your outline and you can fix it. All right, it's easier. You can go back and fix it. You can always edit and improve on a bad product. You can't edit on nothing.
yeah.
So if it's a bunch of blank pages, it's like I can't help you with that. But if you have something there, we can move this around. I mean, think about that. You do this. I don't know how you edit these things here, but I could talk a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I've done a one podcast. I thought it was sounding like a moron, and the guy edited it, and like I sound like Einstein. It made me sound like it was really brilliant, but but it's because the editing, right? So when you go back and edit your own work, it's like, okay, that's just I can fix this, but don't give up. The whole thing is finishing it. Once you get some sort of completion, then you can go back and rewrite. So since Arax was sitting there forever since high school, the first version, which is actually books one and two now, the exact same plot. I added a lot more detail and changed the language and the dialogue and vastly improved. Um, yeah, so don't ever give up on it. Just write a little bit. And the other thing I suggest is if you could write one page a day, right?
Mhm.
And now I know I talked to David, and he writes a lot more than that. He's a very good writer. But if you're new to writing, right? Just if you could write just one typed page a day, right? Single space typed page a day, which is probably like three pages in a notebook. If you do that every day, in 1 year, you'll write a large book, a 400 to 500 page book in 1 year. Then you got to edit it, but still, if you can do one page a day, and people say you should only write when you're inspired. That's not, you write every day. Just force yourself. And sometimes the stuff I force myself to write, I go back and that was great. And stuff I actually planned out and I actually felt inspired is not as good. Sometimes you just have to push your way through it. But as I say, don't give up. Always just write it. You can always fix it later, but getting those ideas down, that's the important thing. And I don't know I don't know if you're like me, but it's funny if I gave you Moby Dick right now to read, or I gave you a comic book that you love, your favorite comic book. Now that comic book I gave you is something you love, and you care about the story. It compares nothing to Moby Dick as a masterpiece, but Moby Dick's boring, and you're never going to read it. So it doesn't matter the important thing, saying the important thing is not really the quality of the writing, it's the quality of the story. Because the story is
Mhm.
what's going to keep you. Now, bad writing will distract you from the story you're reading, right? So
Yeah.
you may soldier through the bad writing because you like the story, but it's a distraction. So what, as a writer, you want to make the writing as good enough as possible so the people are reading your story who love the story don't notice the bad writing or don't notice your writing at all. Then okay, if it's good enough where they can get through it, it's a great story. But if it's a bad story, even if it's poorly, even if it's greatly written, yeah, this is a great written story, but it's kind of like going to a movie that wins an Oscar. I don't want to see it. It's
Mhm.
this is a boring story. It's like it's great. You wrote it well, but I, it's boring. I mean, and it's funny too because you look at throughout history, um, like we put so much emphasis and like it's a really important, especially in high school in English class. This is what the problem I have with their education system. They push you classic literature because it was so game breaking at the time. But the problem is they lose the forest for the trees. Okay, so for instance, the first cave painting, the first caveman, they come in, you look at the wall, there's nothing. You might have passed stories down orally, but as soon as one guy decided to draw a painting on the wall, they're like, "Oh wow, this is awesome! Look, we had a blank wall. Now we have this painting of Uklu killing the mammoth." All right, and then along came the Greek tragedies, right? So people are reading like if you ever heard the Greek tragedy, they're terrible stories. I mean, Oedipus sleeping with his mother, people killing it to their sibling. I mean, this is awful stuff. But
Mhm.
at that time, for what they had before then, it was like this is groundbreaking. We get to go see a play, and then Shakespeare comes along, and we hear it in Old English. We don't understand it. We don't really. It's hard for us to understand it. But at the time, and the stories are good for their time, like kind of like Beowulf before. And Beowulf's a terrible story reading it now, but back then it was like compared. They had nothing else to compare. That's a great story. So Shakespeare at its time is groundbreaking. It's kind of like their Star Wars. This is fantastic, but we find it boring because we have built upon everything. Story is built upon itself. So then you get to the 1900s. You read these early books that come out. Some of them are fantastic. It can hold up at the Count of Monte Cristo. But I said ones like Moby Dick or the Scarlet Letter and things like I don't want to read this. And you're making kids in high school read it. And they get bored of reading and they don't want to read. So that's why it's like you got to have. You look at a lot of contemporary writing, even some of it still doesn't hold. People aren't interested in it. It's like you want to read of Mice and Men or stuff like that. I didn't enjoy it. Some people will love it and think I'm a jerk for saying bad stuff about it. But it's
Mhm.
our attention spans now are very shorter than they were before, and since we already have all this volume of information behind us, it takes a lot to entertain us. So it's like they need to put more focus, I think, in our education system on reading stories that people really want to read.
I think so
And
too, and that's perfect. The way you said that, it makes perfect sense. That yeah, if you put something, whether you're in high school or you're not, you put two things in front of somebody, and one they're interested and one not so much, they're gonna gravitate towards the one that they like. And same thing in would be in high school if there would be the option of, hey, bring in your own, something that interests you. Honestly, if there's parameters and that from a uh, curriculum standpoint. But other than that, if somebody finds one particular genre, type of story more interesting than the others, I think that's a great way to I'm gonna say hook, but kind of in a way hook and keep more students uh, interested in reading because if it's something they like, they're more likely to read it. And like I say, at the very least, look at the pictures if there's any pictures in it versus some piece from 1600 or 1700. And like you said, uh, the stories are groundbreaking at the time, and I think we should be continuing that. Like what's groundbreaking in 2025, and think of things like that instead of just reverting. Well, this is the way we've always done it, and we did it on curriculum last year, so it makes it easy. I don't know what the reasons are. That's a kind of discussion for another day, but a little bit connected. But I mean, I can think of myself back in high school, and yeah, if I had the option to, I don't know, read about sports and the different rules or something, that would have been way more interesting than a lot of the stories and poems and all those that we were asked to read. I really like how you laid that out.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're getting close, and I want to make sure we finish on a finish them much stronger. And it's on me from a time management standpoint, but sometimes it's kind of a conversation, and it
Oh,
just
yeah.
makes sense to keep going. So, uh, once again, can you just share your website, and then where people can purchase them? And I know they can purchase them on your website, and you'll get to that, but then they can also purchase on Amazon as well. But I'll let you give your plugs.
Okay. So there, if you go to my website, it's called Stenix Publishing, which is Stenox, Stenox, stenixpublishing.com. And all the books are all on there. And there's a little synopsis for each of the both of the series. And they're also, of course, on Amazon and Goodreads if you want to look them up. For there's several reviews on there for the first two Arax books and the first Freeborn book. Um, that's funny because people leave reviews. They always read for the first two books. They don't leave reviews for
They
the
don't,
other.
yeah, they don't.
Right. Um, yeah. So stenixpublishing.com, Stenox. Um, Trying to think where else you can find them on there. Yeah, but mainly that and Amazon, and they're on. If you anybody has Kindle Unlimited, I
Okay.
have all the books are available there for free on Kindle Unlimited. So, but I have to warn you, the map for Arax is in the back of the book. That's the way.
Yeah.
Like print copies always cost more, but yeah, but for the Arax books are, and they're pretty. Even for if you don't have Kindle Unlimited, they're not that expensive. I try to keep at least the first six or seven books, or there's at least 4 or 5 books pretty cheap on the. If you people want to, some people like to do e-readers, or lately some people like to do print.
Hmm.
Whatever people's preferences are. Yeah, but Stenix Publishing. I'm not very what do you say, well attuned to technology. So
Hmm.
like managing the website has been very challenging for me. So, but even even your podcast, luckily it was an easy connected link, so that was nice.
Yeah, I was hoping to like try to keep it. I'm the same way. It's like if I got to do 7 steps when I can do one, like I'd rather do the one. And uh, so yeah,
If
I
I
try to.
gave David has my TikTok connection, and I try to put a lot of previews, a little. I do little scenes from mainly the Arax books. I haven't done the Freeborn ones yet, but I do little scenes from each of the books. At least the first 4 books so far. There's a little snippets here and there. I try to do scenes that doesn't give away the plot.
Yeah.
That a little, just a little teaser here or there, kind of like you would do for a commercial, but it was basically a slideshow and with a music in the background that may be appropriate for that scene. I will say Freeborn though, there is a love scene at the end of book one, and a scale of, I guess on the one review I had on a scale of 0 to none to 5 would be right. It rank as a number 2.
Yeah.
So it is, keep that in mind. That's not appropriate for children, but it's a married couple on their wedding night, and I try to keep it subtle enough. So just be make that Freeborn book one. There is a love scene at the end of it, and
I
Arax
appre-
book one there is
yeah,
too, but it's not. It's very subtle. So it's once again somebody on their wedding night.
yeah. I appreciate you doing that and just looking out for
Right, kids.
looking out for kids. That's so important. Oh, Ben, thank you so much for sticking with us for 2 episodes.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank
having me.
Absolutely. It's been a really blessing to have you and learn more about you, the work you do, and to share with our viewers and our listeners. And uh, I encourage each and every one of you to head over to Stenix Publishing to take a look and make a purchase if that so moves you, or if you're on Amazon as well. But I think we would recommend Stenix Publishing from a more of a it's going to be more of a positive impact. Uh, there's oh, let's call it what it is. So Amazon likes to take a little bit of money out when you sell a book, and so if have
Well, the
you're able
aesthetics will
to
connect you to Amazon probably, so it doesn't.
oh, it will connect you. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Um,
okay. No worries. I was just
the only thing I would ask, if anybody reads them, even if you don't like it, just give me a review.
yeah,
Reviews are helpful. You
they're
know,
helpful. Yeah, yeah, because you
and
read
even
them
bad
and
reviews are not bad thing because it's like bad reviews. Just be honest. And bad reviews, people like when if you look at somebody's book and they're all positive reviews, it's like, well, these are all fake.
yeah,
It's all right. Because
yeah,
even the best books written don't have all positive reviews, and mine
yeah.
isn't the best book written. So yeah,
Uh,
it's you just be honest. It's like, but if
great.
you get, I will just say this: if for your Christian viewers, if they get to the end of Arax, they won't be disappointed. And
Good.
Freeborn is a different genre altogether. So I try to, but they will enjoy. I think they would enjoy either series. But
Hmm.
it's yeah, but Arax has got to at least get book at least to get to book three to see the thematic undertones of the story.
Good.
The book one and two sort of sets up. Book one sets up the adventure, and book two is basically jumps into the action, and book three is yeah, it gets into the more deeper stuff. But
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and jumping in. I appreciate you,
thanks for having.
Ben. Yeah, absolutely. And our viewers or listeners, again, whether you're in the United States or in any of the, I think we're at 78 countries that have watched, listened, and just almost 800 cities. It's really just incredible. When you get started, you have this hope that you want to reach and reach nothing, reach the masses, no matter where they're at. And so we're really grateful to each and every one of you that tuned in, watched, listened, uh, check out Ben's work, check out his books. I recommend making a purchase if that so moves you. We would highly encourage that. So until next time, I am founder of Voices for Voices, Justin Allen Hayes, and please be a voice for you or somebody in need. Goodbye.